Hey everybody, my name's Wyatt and I am for the Tunes, and now for my second video that I felt I just had to get out of the way before I start pumping out the good content. Now of course this is a music channel, so I felt people will probably want to know a bit of my music taste, so this video is basically just explaining that and giving a bit of my history with music and how my taste has changed over the last few years, and whatever I enjoy or what I look for really in music and different genres or whatever. So might as well just dive into it. If you want to know more about me as a person, you can check my last video. It was just a bit of an introduction of who I am and what I'm doing with Ferda Tunes and our history. So might as well just dive right in. You know, the first thing I can think of is really being interested in making music as a kid. For as long as I can remember, I've loved playing the drums, and when Rock Band came out on PlayStation 2 or whatever the fuck way back, I would spend whole nights, whole days just playing that. And honestly, that game is what kind of made me realize that, like, hey, I'm actually kind of good at this. I'm not trying to gas myself up or anything. I did end up very lucky with a really awesome kit for maybe 2 years of my life. Unfortunately, I had to get rid of it. There was no controlling that. But I always loved playing the drums. It was always by far the funnest and most like stress relieving thing for me, I guess. All I can pray is that I get a beautiful drum kit in the future that I can just beat the shit out of. But moving on, once I got into high school, I started writing raps a lot. Once I got really into hip-hop, I'll get into that in a minute. That and beat making just ended up kind of being a bit more of a hobby for me. I just ended up having some fun with it and then kind of moving on because it just wasn't really my thing and I didn't think I was very good at it. So not much else with that. We might as well just dive into how my personal taste has changed over the years, a little timeline style. I'll try to at least. So I was probably grade 5 or 6 when I started to discover full-length albums, and growing up my mom always played a lot of classic 70s rock, as I'm sure most parents do, especially the dads out there. Elton John and David Bowie have always been favorites of mine and have grown even stronger, closer to me as the years have progressed. But like Zeppelin, the Eagles, Floyd, even the Beatles obviously, CCR, even like Prince, MJ obviously, that type of stuff. I wish I dove into them more back then because I definitely appreciate them now and their bodies of work. Once I hit grade 6 and 7-ish, I started listening to a shit ton of heavy metal. I've never called myself a metalhead, and I still admittedly don't know too much about the genre, and especially all the little niche subgenres. Just ever since my big phase back then, I've never been the type to just kind of sit and listen to metal regularly. I love it to death when I'm working out though. It's nothing better. But back then I listened to a ton of like Metallica, Slayer, System of a Down was huge for me, Slipknot. Now I really love bands like Blood Incantation and Power Trip. Now grade 8 I think is when I really got into rap music. Eminem and Tupac were the big introductions for me. Surprise, surprise. I'm your typical 13 whatever year old white kid. And for a while I was definitely that like, yo, I only listen to real hip hop, bro. Yeah, I was that intolerable piece of shit. And I'm really happy I got out of that little box that I was in for maybe not even a year. But once I got into high school, really, grade 9 I'd say, I essentially studied hip hop. Like everything from the history and just trying to discover as many rappers and all the classic albums as I could. I'd literally be like reading Wikipedia pages and just listening to like 90s rap albums, just a new one every day when I got home from school. I just completely fell in love with and immersed myself in hip-hop culture, and I was obsessed. Like I was literally studying shit. I've always loved Kendrick since I heard him in grade 9, of course, like who doesn't really? But I'd say a few of my favorite rappers out right now are more like Freddie Gibbs, Earl Sweatshirt, Juicy J, Mac Miller. I guess like Future, Maxo Cream, Booyah I like. Obviously love the legends like Jay, Kanye, Pac, obviously. The Roots, Tribe Called Quest, I'm big on. KRS, Scarface, of course, Wu-Tang, you know. I feel like pretty much all old school hip-hop I'm pretty much cool on. So I took 2 years off after high school, and in my spare time I just found myself just chasing music. Just wanting to dive deeper into anything that sparked my interest. And if you know the co-host of the podcast, John Marco, a good friend of ours, Lucas, came over one day, just one night to just chill and ball. And I can basically credit him towards like all my knowledge of any like IDM or house music or electronic music really as a whole. He gave us a few essentials and some mind blowers that I'll always love, and then from there I would just dive deeper down the rabbit hole, and that's the start of my electronic phase, I guess. Whatever little genre it was, like IDM, house, like I said, I was big on. Down tempo was always my favorite. Even ambient I've been getting into a lot recently, especially since the whole quarantine. Like Brian Eno and Steve Roach have been getting a lot of listens from me. Aphex Twin has become by far a top 10 artist of all time for me. I love Boards of Canada. Again, ever since the whole isolation thing, I was listening to them a lot. And they're an artist, the more I listen to, the more I just love it. Burial and Fortet I got into super heavy back then. Tycho, Odessa I still love. I got into Autechre recently. They've been blowing my shit away. I couldn't believe how long it took me to really start appreciating that kind of electronic music. And I really can't help but feel bad for the people who never explore this side of music, because it can be very niche. Especially the ambient stuff. I feel like a lot of people just don't even think about it and write it off as just uninteresting or just not exciting music. And I mean, it's not exciting, but it can be unbelievably immersive. Electronic music as a whole has for sure given me by far some of my favorite songs I've ever heard and some of my favorite sounds that have ever graced these ears. I've dipped my toes into quite a bit of experimental music, I'd say, over the years. There's tons of heavy experimental work that I love, but I don't personally go out searching for it for the sole purpose that it's kind of time consuming for me, because I like to listen to stuff a few times and digest it, especially experimental music, so that's the only reason why I haven't dove headfirst into that type of stuff. Maybe one day I will. And I know they're like basically mainstream now, but Death Grips is one of my favorite bands like ever. I know people fucking hate them. And Animal Collective too, they very quickly become like one of my favorite bands ever. So basically at some point after high school I decided to really focus and spend time on expanding my tastes and listening to new music. I just wanted to find the most essential and the best of the best in whatever genre I was interested in week to week, like jazz, progressive rock, folk, various kinds of pop, tons of IDM too, like I mentioned, singer-songwriter stuff even, whatever I was feeling at the day, whatever, I would just kind of follow my ears. I've even surprised myself recently. I got a lot more into folk music and that just led me straight into country. I was never one of those all country sucks kind of idiots, because writing off a whole genre or sound as all bad is so fucking stupid. But I definitely just never knew much and I never really wanted to dive in, but something clicked last year, because all the 50s and 60s country I absolutely adore now. I just dove deep into like the most essential albums, like I said, and of course like Willie Nelson, Dolly Parton is huge, but Waylon Jennings very quickly became one of my favorite artists to ever live. The thing that just really pulled me in for that was the songwriting of that era. I've never appreciated songwriting like I have with these country albums that I've just fallen so in love with. So as much as I'd like to just stand here and talk about what I like, who I like, when I like it, why I like it, I obviously don't want this video to be a half hour, so I'll cut it here. And I'd be kicking myself in the head if I didn't mention a very good friend of mine, Matthew Zeitler, has been making some hits this year that I really fuck with. And obviously, you know, support your boys. So if you're looking for some really dope indie pop hits with some electronic flavor and some real catchy songwriting, I highly recommend. I'll leave his streaming links in the description below. And that's about it. If you have any questions for me, leave a comment below or hit me up on Instagram and Twitter. Our links are in the description. You can check the podcast episodes from last year if you want to hear more content from me and the boys. So thanks again, guys. Subscribe if you want to stay tuned, and take it easy.